There we go. Good. All right. Let us. There we go. Good. Okay. Yesterday we were talking about having love and fear of God, and this is very basic principle of life to feel how close God is, and how valuable God is, not how far away God is. Even though the fact is that the perception of God is very far away, and that and there are things that we can do that'll make it even further, namely just act naturally. So God created us in a natural way that we don't feel that we're being created, and that we're being created constantly, and that we're being created for a reason, for a reason, and that God cares about us, and that God helps us, and that God is with us. God enlivens us. We don't feel any of those things. But when a person does feel the fact, that's the fact, and that we aren't a separate entity from God, that in fact we're not an entity at all, that the only real entity is God. Oh, good morning. So when a person feels what God really is, then he'll have love and fear for God. It's something like not far away from the idea of let's say life or family. If a person really values life, so he won't want to do things that harm himself or others. But if he doesn't have any value for life, then he can be a murderer to do whatever. But life is a fact. Life is here, and the fact is, life is really very precious, whether you value it or you don't. It's an amazing gift. But there's some people that just don't appreciate that gift. The same thing, there's the creator of life, there's the giver of life, who's giving it to us right now. That's the point. Not that that God created man thousands of years ago, billions of years ago, and he just sort of lets the thing go, and that God's a separate entity and we're a separate entity. Even though that seems to be the narrative of the Bible, but the fact is that God is really creating us all the time. So when we feel this, then it's like valuing life. Suddenly we have a whole new set of awareness in the world. It's like discovering America. Suddenly there's a whole new source of resources and possibilities and potentials we weren't even aware of. So that's the idea of being aware of the creator, and how much the creator loves us, and how much the creator is creating us. So this is not a religious thing about talking about the afterlife and such like that, even though there is such a thing as the afterlife. Not that there is reward, and there's definitely punishment, and God definitely cares about what we do, and he has a set of lines of rules about what we do. So there's such a thing as reward and punishment, but that's not the topic here. The topic is to value the one who's giving these principles, these values. To value the one who's creating us, the one who cares about. That's God. So when a person really feels that God is creating everything, and how good God is, then he'll come to a level of love of God and also awe of God. Right? It's hard to believe that there's such a thing that's true, that we're being created. You don't feel it. But once you do feel it a little bit, and you appreciate it, you think about it, then you have love and fear. Okay, so the Rebbe is saying that love and fear, in fact, is the essence of what man is. To feel God, to feel that he's created. It's the opposite of our nature, but we can make it into our nature. In other words, to make it into our nature, to feel godliness, just like a musician. If he doesn't know anything about music, then, he never heard music before. But if he hears music, he starts to appreciate it, becomes part of his nature. So he appreciates this thing, which is called music. It's a reality. It's called music. The same thing, we can appreciate the fact that we're being created. We can appreciate the creator. And when we do that, appreciation transforms to love and to fear. Love, because we feel how good God is, and fear that we won't appreciate sufficiently, right? Or we even do things that are against our creator. Okay. So it says the Rebbe, but there's this now it starts getting complicated. Now it starts getting complicated. It's like the story, they say a joke about a child that he was taken. He didn't want to go to school. Didn't want to go to school. The first grade. He didn't want to go to first grade. So his parents said, well, "Why not? Come on, go to school." It's going to be fun. He says, I know what type of fun. He says, I'm going to go there. And first of all, they're going to teach me Aleph base. And then after that, that's not going to be enough. Then I'm going to have to know how to say the letters properly. Then I'm going to have to know how to put the words together. Then I'm going to have to read books. Then I'm going to have to understand the books. Then I'm going to have to remember the books. It's better I just stop in the beginning and not learn anything. And then I won't have any of these problems understanding and getting things wrong. Okay, that's a bit ridiculous, but it's no less ridiculous than talking that way about God, saying, why should I even start trying to appreciate God? If I appreciate God, then there's going to be love and levels of love. And then there's going to be this other problem the Rebbe is talking about. And that is people that no matter how much they think, they simply, and they contemplate how close God is and how good God is and how wonderful God is and how there's nothing except for God, etc. They just doesn't do anything to them. It just doesn't do anything whatsoever. You know, they know that that they're, all I know is I'm here. I don't feel anybody's creating me. I don't feel, there's no love or fear whatsoever. So that's called akara. That's called, I'm sorry. That's called akara. They can't give birth to any love or fear. They just can't give birth. Then there's another level where a person does give birth to love and fear. He does have a little appreciation of God, but he doesn't really take it that seriously. Or if he does, it's just for a very short amount of time. And then the rest of the time, he just feels himself like a normal person. That's called mashakela. Mashakela is a woman who gives birth, but her babies die. Same thing. You give birth to love and fear. We're talking about spiritually, right? You give birth to love and fear, but it dies. And the other one is akara, a barren woman. She doesn't give birth at all. That means we're talking about us, people, that it's impossible for us to have, we just don't feel any love or fear of God whatsoever. Don't feel. You can understand the ideas, but it just doesn't catch. Okay, there's another type of otka, there's another type of akara, there's another type of a barren woman, there's another type of barrenness. There's another type of barrenness, namely that we think about God, but it doesn't catch, it doesn't give birth. It doesn't give birth to love and fear. We can't simply appreciate that God is there. It's just, I mean, we can understand the ideas, but it just doesn't catch. It doesn't catch, we don't get emotional about it. Who can you mind result? This is like what the rabbis say, like it says, Ein lo velad. It says about Sarah, Abraham and Sarah, that she didn't have any children. I mean, it could be, I have to look and see, maybe it says the same thing about Hannah. Hannah, I think it does say the same thing about Hannah. Hannah was the mother of Shmuel, the first prophet, Hannah. So it says, Hannah says, Ein lo velad. She hasn't got a child. She didn't have any children. She was barren. She had no children. But it says it was worse than that. Afilu beit velad ein lo. She didn't have a uterus. She didn't have a womb. Shahayu metumtamim. Namely, somehow or other, it was just closed up. Shenistam kokach. It was closed up so much. Ad she'ein lo kli. There's no even vessel to receive a fetus. No womb. Okay, what's that got to do with us? Giving birth to love and fear of God, appreciation of God. Alter says similarly, Hine yesh ba'adam, there is in man, Kamkein also. And just by the way, I mean, when Mashiach comes, one of the main things Mashiach is going to bring is an appreciation of God. Maybe we can say that's the main thing he's going to bring. I mean, another way we can say that's the only thing he's going to bring. Mashiach is going to bring about an appreciation of God. That he's going to remove all impediments to appreciate God, and everyone's going to appreciate God. But God is not like any of the other religions define him. We're talking about the God of Israel. Say, Ein Kelokenu, there's nothing like our God. The God of Israel creates everything constantly for a reason from love. And this reason is the Torah. Everyone in the world should feel this. There's the 7 Noahide commandments. Everyone in the world should feel this. It's a necessary thing that everyone should feel. Okay, so the Rebbe says, but we see that people don't feel it. So the Rebbe says, well, there's several reasons. One reason is that you can think about God and think about all these ideas, and it gives birth to a little bit of love and appreciation of God, but it goes away. That's called being, how do you say, bereaved, a bereaved mother, mashakela. Or you can think about the ideas. It's just, you get the ideas, but it just doesn't catch. Just doesn't catch in your mind, right? That's a woman. She just, she doesn't get pregnant. Same thing. We don't give birth to love and fear. It just doesn't. But then there's another type of barrenness that the woman doesn't even have a womb at all. It's closed up somehow or other. It's closed up so much that it doesn't accept even the ideas about God. It just doesn't register at all. There is a similarly yesh b'adam. There are certain people Hashem to serving God. It doesn't grasp in his mind the seichlo and his intellect the ha'emet, the truth. Kasheru as it is, because she'ein lo bechinas, she'ein lo kli machzik. He hasn't got any vessel. What does it mean? It's like a person, let's say, that his ears are closed up or something, so he can only vaguely hears sounds. This person is not going to be able to appreciate music. There's some people that can't carry a tune. Just for instance, they can't carry a tune. They're tone deaf. They're tone deaf. But they can sort of sing along with the tone. I know people like that, right? You sing a song to them. Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light? What do they think? But how do they sing? Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light? They hear this up and down. They just don't really, it just doesn't catch. But there's some people that they just don't hear sounds at all. They just don't hear music at all. They can hear little sort of wisps or something like that. It says the same thing. There are people that cannot receive any ideas about God whatsoever. It just doesn't make any sense to them. The whole thing just doesn't make any sense. I'm here, I exist. I don't understand. I'm being created. What are you talking about? Says the Rebbe, but if you read and you see that this is a necessary thing and it's a good thing and it's a positive thing, and you're just missing out on something that exists. So what's a person supposed to do? Okay, why? Knesset Israel, the Jewish people, they're called Kos Yeshuot. They are called the cup of salvation. Shehu Kli, salvation means a revelation of God from above, a very high type of revelation of God. And the Jewish people, they are the vessel for this revelation. Shehu Kli, that the Jewish people are a vessel to receive a Hasidim, the great love of God. V'nikra Kos Shel Bracha, it's also called the cup of blessing. Shemakabelet Yayin, it receives this wine, and there's these blessings of God, this inspiration of God, I'm a sameach, which makes us happy. And there's a feeling that God exists. You can accept it. That's what the Jewish people are. Hainu bechinas hizbonenus anal, namely that accept these ideas that we talked about before, about the oneness of God and the goodness of God, and how God is creating us all the time. He's creating us for a purpose. He's creating us from love. You can think about these ideas, and the ideas register. But sometimes these ideas don't register in the emotions. That's called barren. A person who's barren doesn't give birth to love and fear. But there's other people that don't even get the ideas. They don't get the ideas. The Jewish people, the whole thing is they're supposed to bring these ideas about the oneness of God, define what God is to the world in a proper way. That's what job of the Jews. The Jews are called the cup of blessing. But this is only when the Jews are empty of their own egotism, which is not the case. When a person is filled with his own selfishness, he thinks that he is a separate thing. He feels himself. We're not talking about thinking. This is not philosophy. We're talking about a person feels himself, a natural, normal feeling. Therefore, therefore, he's always occupied in his own desires. Lomer, to say, this is what I want. This is what is good for me. As a person like that he's always thinking about himself, and he's always feeling himself, and he's always reacting to this feeling. He's not able. I'm sorry. Kachli, kachli tov, ze'eni yochel asod. And this I can't do, right? But this is a continuation. A person is always concerned with himself. I. Yesh b'ze pratim, pratim, ad ein mispar. This especially, I mean, if you ever learned Freud and Adler and all these people, I mean, they looked at man like an animal. And so they said that the whole essence, what really drives a man is what feels good and what's not, what he's afraid of. And there's conscious and subconscious things, and in his past and sexual drives and personal drives and sociological drives, and these drives, that's because they're looking at man without a soul. They're looking at man with no soul. But here the Rebbe is saying that that's a lie, though. That's a big lie. You're reducing man to something much less than what he really is. Professor Viktor Frankl brings an example. He says it's like saying an airplane is a car because it drives on the runway. But there's much more to it than an airplane than that. The same thing, there's much more to a man, a human being, than just what I want and what I think and what's good for me and what's bad for me. And this is not what that's. But that seems to define what man is. I mean, these people, Freud and Adler, they were big geniuses, but they were also people with basically no soul. They denied the whole existence of a soul or of God. So says the Rebbe, that's a natural thing to do. It's a natural thing to do, to deny that there's a soul and to deny that there's God. That's the way God created us, that we deny it. We don't feel it. So some people get so stuck in this lack of feeling God, they don't even understand that there could be such a thing like that. Famous thing that Freud said, that once a person starts to think that maybe there's God, it's a sign that he's sick. Thinks about the meaning of life, he says a person is sick. But derech in general, yesh bechinas, every human being has this. Every Jew has this. Every Jew can find this in your soul, whether people that work in making money, whether people that sit and learn Torah, b'chol davar, and everything she'omar ani. Anytime you say I want, I think, this is what I want, machmazeh, because of this, the tamtem v'nistam mocho, his mind, not just his heart, his mind becomes stuffed up, and he can't understand any of these ideas about God and creation and the Creator. And the Torah, and that God cares about us and He creates us. And what are you talking about? Just doesn't register in his mind. Okay, what are you supposed to do? The Rebbe is not just coming to tell us how sick we are. The Rebbe is trying to reveal that if you don't feel what God is, it's called sick, and there's a healing for it. It's not a fatal disease, and it's not a thing you're going to get punished for. That's the way God created us. In fact, that's one of the reasons why no matter what sins a person does, he can always get forgiven. Because a person could say, listen, the reason I sinned is because you created me that way, God. What do you want? I just didn't muster up the power to fight against it. But I mean, you created too much of a how do you say, a concealment. You concealed yourself totally. What do you want from me? God. So it says, okay, good. The fact, that's right, good. We have a good excuse. But the fact of the matter is that you can't live on excuses. You can't live on excuses. You have good excuses, but excuses don't get anything done. How do we fix the situation? The advice I'm going to give you is like this. Lasot kli rikan. You have to make yourself into an empty vessel. How? Leiv nishbar v'nitke. By breaking your heart and, how do you say, humbling yourself. Eshkon, then I will dwell with you. Et daka, with a humble person. Hukamashal uman. This is like take an example, a artisan, a pot maker. Shows a kli kibel that he's making a pot. Shetzurach, first of all, hakoto, you have to hit it with a vessel. Let's say you're making a pot from metal. So first of all, you have to hit it with a hammer, saviv, around and around, until the inside goes down. Right? First, they've got a place that doesn't until it goes down. Then it vessels. Also, that's what we have to do ourselves. He also has to push himself down, to be humble, that he won't take up any place at all. So he doesn't get mad. Why doesn't he get mad? Because he doesn't take up any place. Right? Let's say somebody comes up to you and says, you're ugly. You're ugly and you're stupid. I know you from school, George. My name is not George. One second, you're not George Gross? Not George Gross. He says, oh, I'm sorry. I made a mistake. Right? But what if your name was George Gross and somebody came up to you and said, you're ugly and you're stupid and this, you feel bad, you get all angry. As soon as he said, that's not me. I'm talking to the wrong person. Right? And then all of a sudden you don't care anymore. Who says, well, that's the way you should look at all things that make you feel your ego. You're egotistical. Somebody cuts you off in the street. It's not me. If you cut somebody else off, you don't get angry. Right? If something bad happens to somebody else, you don't feel so depressed and so miserable and so awful. So in other words, you're able to look at things more objectively. The less emotional you get about yourself, then the more emotional you can get, or at least you can get even intellectual about your creator. Because what stops us from feeling our creator is our certainty that we exist. And we do exist, but we only exist in a bigger framework, and that's what we're not seeing. What's the framework that we're being created? So if we look at if we stop being so egotistical and so, how do you say, short-sighted, what do they call it, myopic, then we can suddenly see maybe maybe God is really creating me. Maybe I'm not so important as I thought. Maybe, there's a whole, anyway, in general, I mean, all these bad character traits are bad. There's a whole branch of how do you say, philosophy of life called Stoicism, where you do what's practical. And getting angry is not practical. Getting angry just wrecks everything up. Right? Being depressed it's not practical, doesn't help you. So therefore, if you have to make whatever tricks you can not to get angry and not to get that's also okay. You use whatever you want to. But the whole purpose, to get rid of the bad character traits is good. But here, Stoicism and those other things, you're just doing this, how to win friends and influence people. You're doing it for yourself, that I'll be able to get. And here the Rebbe is saying that you can actually do things for the Creator by totally not thinking about yourself. And that's going to be the biggest benefit of all. That's what Abraham was. That's the whole story about Abraham. That's why it doesn't talk about Abraham, doesn't talk about in the Torah what you're going to get. You're going to get heaven, you're going to get hell. Because Abraham set the tone. You do things for God. You say things for God. You think why? Because God is the creator. And you're not thinking about heaven, hell, this world, nothing whatsoever. You just think what God, and God is pretty good, and he creates like trillions and trillions of nervous systems in the world of all the bugs and all the animals. So he knows what he's doing. If you let him take over, then things could be that things will go good. I mean, you've never made a respiratory system in your life. You never made a circulatory system of anything. And God is making billions of them. So he knows he can provide you money. He can provide you this. Just be honest. He'll provide you a job. He'll provide you it. And you just have to do what he wants. Do what he wants. You want to be a doctor? Go to school, learn, but be an honest doctor. Be a truthful doctor, right? Be a doctor that believes in the Creator, that thinks that life is precious. That means a person has to not take up any place at all. Sheyeh makomi panui, that my place will be empty, v'chalal, and panui, it'll be clean and empty. Ke'ilu ayin ve'efes mamish, like I'm nothing. So you look at yourself like you would look at someone else. That's called looking at yourself from God's point of view. So that means a person that is not even able to understand ideas about God. So it's a sign that the reason he can't is because his ears are stuffed up, his mind is stuffed up. What's it stuffed up with? Egotism. Get rid of the egotism. Don't be so insistent about I think and I want and I and my job and my family and look what my kids do and I don't get enough honor and I don't have enough money and look what this guy has and why is he better than me? Stop those thoughts. They're totally negative and you're not adding anything to the world and you're certainly not benefiting yourself. And whatever it is, and even if you are benefiting yourself, you're on the wrong track. But Odachas, he is, Mashomer is all what the rabbis say. Koshel bracha, you have to wash it out. A blessing, the course of blessing one, you have to wash it out. Even though it's empty, but you have to wash it out. What does it mean? The Rebbe is telling us how we can grasp ideas about God and how we can get excited about them. But first of all, we have to be open. How is this? You have to first of all pound yourself a little bit, empty yourself out of your own egotism, and don't get angry when you want to. Close your mouth a little bit, right? Don't eat what you want to. Don't say what you want to. Think: is this what God wants? That's called escafia. Then after that, there's another thing. There's another thing. We have to. This is the cup that receives the blessing. In other words, now you can receive the blessing of God. You can start to get love and fear of God. That's the blessing. Then you have to, but you have to wash out the vessel. Wash out. This is the cup of blessing, kos bracha. You have to wash it out. Kihu ton shtifa, it says. Inyan is like this: even a person who is humble by nature could go into on a, for instance, a person. Let's say he's poor, but and he can never. He knows that he knows that everybody is. How do you say that he? He's on a higher standing than him. He can't tell anyone what to do ever. He knows that he's on the bottom of the totem pole. Okay, so he's that's it. He's humble. A humble person. He's not filled with egotism at all, right? He never gets angry in everybody. He knows he's got nothing. So that's good, right? He's open for godliness. Now he's open for godliness, even though you don't have to be poor. But he's just giving an extreme example. Even a person who's the ultimate humility, but nevertheless, you have to not yata libo, to incline your heart even for permissible things. Liyod makusher b'hem, to be attached to them, b'kol leiv v'nefesh. Ki efsher la'olam she's kayem asiyas davarim amutarim below leiv gamke. A person, let's say, he's really poor, right? But when he gets a sandwich or somebody gives him a money, then he's really attached to it. He could get angry if somebody takes it away from him. And it's a permissible thing, but he's crazy about it. Attached to the world, he cannot be a vessel until until he refines himself. This is like a dirty vessel. I mean, maybe I can tell you that this. I think I said this before. When I was young, I remember there was a fellow that used to live across the street from me. I lived in Detroit, so it was a big thing about cars. You had cars, and maybe they're less expensive. Anyway, he had two really nice cars. You know, they were convertibles. They were nice colors. You know, one I remember was like pink, and the other one was like blue or something. And he had like wet leather seats, and he would polish these cars up all the time. The cars really looked nice. But suddenly I realized that this, and it's okay to have a car. What's wrong with having a car? But suddenly I realized that this fellow was like obsessed with these cars. He would like go out every day and he would polish them. And every day he would like, you know, turn the car on. He had these special things done to his muffler, so it sounded really good. And he would drive the car around the street, and he would park it. And then he would look at it. He would stand and look at it. Polish it up a little bit more. And I saw that he was obsessed with the cars. He had an obsession with the cars. He would come out regularly every few hours and just look at the car and polish it up a little bit more. One day I remember somebody came out in the morning, somebody had maybe a drunk guy knocked into both cars and wrecked them. He's just like, you know, I saw he was just broken, you know. In other words, it's possible to be a humble person, but to be too attached to permissible things, too much attached to permissible things. We're not talking about forbidden things, but they take up too much place in the person. The person starts to become devoted to them. Like this, like they say, you own the Ferrari, or does the Ferrari own you? You know, somebody scratches his Ferrari, it goes burst. So, but we can find this about many things in the world. Many things in the world. You know, something that somebody splashes something on your suit, so you get all angry. Says the Rebbe, listen, we're talking about loving God here. If you really love God, so you want to love God. You want to have an appreciation for your Creator. We're not talking about being religious, just having an appreciation for your Creator, having an appreciation for life, having an appreciation for what reality is, how good God is, how close God is. You want to have an appreciation for that, so you have to be not obsessed with yourself. Not obsessed even with permissible things. You're a religious guy and you do all the commandments and you're religious, but you're obsessed that you have to receive. And when you come into the room, everybody has to stand up. Everybody has to speak nicely to you. You're obsessed with it. And it could be that you really deserve it and etc. But still, because of that little tiny thing is it makes it impossible for you to really appreciate God. Like somebody gives you a nice, beautiful cup, golden cup, and they pour good wine in it, but you look in to see that the cup is dirty. You can't put any wine in it until you wash the cup out. And so also a woman cannot become pregnant even if she has a womb, if she doesn't become pure from her impurity. And the times when she's menstruating, for instance, she can't give birth to children. So the same thing with us, we have to, if we want to be a receptacle for ideas about serving God, which that's what the Moshiach is going to bring to the whole entire world. That's the big change the Moshiach is going to bring to the world, that everyone is going to appreciate the Creator and to be in tune with the Creator and to make the world more the way the Creator wants. But if you want to feel this, so you have to be less concerned with yourself, less obsessed with yourself. And sometimes we don't even know how much we love ourselves. We have no idea how much we love ourselves. But by means of humility, and then also by not being too attached to the world, we can do that. Okay. After you make a vessel for this and you're washed out, there's one more thing you have to do, and this is what it says. That Chana prayed to God. She prayed and she cried. Israel, the Jewish people, there's many different levels and many names. When the Jewish people are holada, when they are giving birth to love and fear of God, then they're called Leah. Leah is the mother of the children. And not by accident, Leah had 6 sons and 1 daughter. That corresponds to the 6 emotions, love and fear, etc. And 1 daughter is action. It's the 6 emotions in action. That's the level of Leah. That's when the Jewish people give birth to love and fear and are aware of the Creator. But when the Jewish people are barren, it doesn't give birth to this love and fear, then it's called Chana. That says the Chana in Yeladim. Like it says that Chana hasn't got any children. What are you supposed to do? So it says, well, here he just gave us all these advices, be less egotistical, humble yourself, be humble in front of God. Don't think so much about my pleasures and what I want and what I think. Says, but then there's another thing you must not forget, and that is to pray. The advice is to pray. That God, she prayed to God. Now, a very basic thing of Judaism is, especially Hasidic Judaism, is that God personally himself answers prayers. And idolatry is when you pray to something else. You can go to people for help. You can go to a doctor to help you out. It's not just God helps you alone. And you can go to holy people to receive blessings from them. It's a good thing to bless people. And blessings of people help. And there's some people whose blessings help more. That's the idea of the Rebbe. But you're not praying. You know that the blessings come from God. And these people, they're just have a special talent that they can bring God's blessing into the world. But it comes from God. God has the ability to change anything. God creates everything from nothing. And when we pray to God, as God answers, not always does he answer the way we want. Not always does he answer what we want. Not always does he give us what we want, right? But he always gives us what we need. Sometimes a person has to work a little bit harder for what he's got. Sometimes a person has to wait. Sometimes it's not good that a person should be rich or should be, who knows? God has his ways of doing it. Don't ask me. I don't understand what's going on. If it was up to me, I wouldn't have created the whole world in the first place. I would just let the whole thing go. So You try to understand what God does. If you really try to understand what God does, then you'll see that there's no logic to creating the whole world in the first place. What does the world have to be here for? But God did create the world, and the world is very important, and it's good that we're here. But nevertheless, one of the things that we can do to change the world is prayer. The Indian is Chana prayed to God. To Yud Kei Vav Kei. This name of God, Yud Kei Vav Kei, Mora, this indicates on Shemahava, that God creates everything. The name of God, Yud, and then Hey Vav Hey. Hey Vav Hey means to be. So God is constantly bringing all existence into being. God brings all existence from nothing to something always. V'shem Zeh, this name of God, who b'kol olamos, it's in all of the worlds. All of the worlds are being created by God. She'ein chiluk b'neim, there's no difference between them. By God, to create something from nothing, it doesn't make any difference what that something is, whether it's a big something or a small something. Everything is basically made of nothing. So it ends up to God, all the cosmos and all the nebulae and everything, to create them is just as equally as difficult, if you want to say it, than to create a pebble or a wind or something. It's all being created from nothing. That's so God creates all the worlds, and the worlds are like nothing. But in Torah Klal, in general, Hine, behold, God enlivens everything and creates everything from nothing to something. But this true name of God, this name of God is only necessary for the worlds, but by God Himself, lo shayach klal, there's no name. You can't call God a name. Names are only for someone outside of you. The kula kamei, because everything in front of God is like nothing. All there is God. I am God, I never changed. Names are only relevant if there's something outside of a person. You call him a name, but there's nothing outside of God. Atu kodem God, you're the one before the world. You're the same God as after the world. That's what it says. Before God created the world, there was God in His name alone. God in His name alone, the God Himself. Okay, but this name of God, so there was, so to speak, two things. There was God and His name. What does it mean, God's name? God's name is the same thing as God's will. So God creates everything from His name. Let's see where we go over here. 1 second. Okay, so when a person realizes that everything is being created from nothing, then a person will get excited and he'll give himself over to the essence of God. But Paul Mamish, actually, be nefesh sameh, that your soul be thirsty, the kulsa, and given over to God. When you realize that my whole existence is just this amazing gift and a surprise and a miracle that God is giving me every single instant, and think about how good and amazing God is, then all I want to do is be connected to God. All of your thoughts, speech, and action, your thoughts, speech, and action, and will want to be attached to the thought, speech, and action of God. God and His commandments. That's the thought, speech, and action of God. That's the commandments of God. Okay, but that's what it means that Chana prayed to God. What does it mean? Her prayer, tefillah, is attachment. Tefillah, the word tefillah means tafel, means also to unite. Hitkashrut atzmut el Hashem, to be attached to God, namely above al Hashem. It says that Chana prayed al over God, above any of the names of God that talks about how God is creating the world. But she wanted to be totally negated in the essence of God. Now, from the essence of God, God is creating the world, so God can create anything He wants to. And from this level of godliness can be drawn down rachamim rabim, tremendous mercy on the spark of godliness which is in the soul. That's what it means. She cried. She cried to God to arouse this mercy. So according to what we've been learning here, The simple meaning is that Hannah prayed so that she would have a child. And she did give birth to a child, Shmuel. But what we've been learning here is in a spiritual way, giving birth means to have love and fear from our thoughts, giving birth in our soul to love and fear. So Hannah, she was barren and she was not able to give birth. So she prayed. So what we're talking about, let's how do you say, translate that to what we've been learning. We can't give, sometimes a person is barren, he can't give birth to love and fear. What's the answer? Pray. If you pray to the essence of God, so God can change anything he wants. That's what God is called a Melech HaMaromam Lavad, that God is elevated alone, higher than the world, higher than the creation of the world. God is higher than any of the worlds, incomparably higher to the world. All of these worlds, the upper heavens and the lower heavens, etc., which is not the case. The worlds of all the worlds, everything that's below is only created from God's mercy. So therefore, it says, "V'zeu Elokei Olam b'rachamecha," that we're asking God for mercy. That's what Hannah said. Okay, you created the world in an orderly way. It's decided by you. I'm not going to have any children. That's your decision, God. I'm asking for your mercy. Change your decision. I'm not something higher than the world. That's what we're saying. Because we don't understand in our mind this great mercy that you have on us, that you're creating us. So we're requesting for you to have mercy so that we should understand your mercy. We shouldn't get sunk into the world. And that God, you should be what's called Magen Yishenu. You should be a shield of salvation, and you should elevate us. What does it mean? Miskav, you should elevate us. Like a wall that's elevated, raised up around us to protect us. Also, you should protect us and hide us from all of our enemies from outside and from inside. Outside and from inside means bad thoughts and also from bad urges and etc. So these are the things which prevent us from having love and fear of God. And requesting God, please God, help me, that I should open my mind, that I should have an appreciation of you, and that this appreciation should bring to love and fear a true awareness and connection to you. That's how we can combat this mashakela, giving birth to love and fear of God, but it dying, or akara, understanding ideas of God, but it doesn't give birth, or even worse, akara, like it says by Hannah, that she wasn't able to understand the ideas about God. So it says one way is by humbling ourselves and cleaning ourselves of our false egotism, and also not to forget to pray, because it all depends on God's mercy. Very good. Now let's learn the Devar Malchut. 1 minute.